So if I wasn't laughing, y'all would be able to tell that I am freaking mad. Say goodbye to Australia. They are about to take the wrong pill and join nations like Greece, Portugal, Argentina, Venezuela as they slowly, or perhaps not so slowly, lose their first world status. Yes, I just said that out loud. Okay, let me play this crazy little 7-second video clip and then we'll go. Everything's crazy today because I'm so mad about what's about to happen to Australia. If I haven't said that, am I overreacting? I might be. Y'all can decide. The other hosts here, Reese, Doug, Ryan, y'all can decide if I'm overreacting or not. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm overreacting. But I honestly believe that Australia is about to shoot itself in the foot, financially speaking, and it's about to destroy its economy if it moves forward with its plan. So what are they doing? What are they doing? And why am I freaking out? Well, here's why I'm freaking out. It's because if you see a friend that's about to jump off a cliff in today's culture, a lot of times people say, hey, don't say anything that's going to disrupt. Don't say anything that's going to offend. Don't say anything that's going to make people upset, right? Like, just kind of like, they're fine. But it's like, no, even if they haven't done it yet, I'm going to speak up and I'm going to say something because there's the potential that they're going to, and I can see what's coming, right? What is Australia doing to itself? Well, let me throw up some articles here. All right. Bringing the intensity today. I feel it. I've been feeling it for days. Australian Treasurer Jim Chalmers has stated that the Australian government will reintroduce the Division 296 tax proposal. This is actually huge news. This is a huge deal. What does it do? This bill imposes an additional 15% tax on superannuation account earnings. That is a 30% tax altogether. Think about anything in your life that you would not want to be taxed 30% on. And that applies to everything across the board, right? But the worst part is not the number involved, the percentage involved, but it is how the tax actually works. This tax now applies to unrealized capital gains. Mm-hmm. And for those that don't know what that is, we're going to talk about that in a second. Mm-hmm. But it gets worse. It gets a lot worse. Okay, what is a superannuation account? It is actually Australia's version of the 401k here in the States. Except that, and y'all, the other hosts might remember that I had this idea a couple months back when we were talking about taxes and saving for retirement. I had this crazy idea in my mind. I was like, well, what if the government just required you to have a retirement savings account, and they pulled the money out and put it aside, and it was going to grow, and it's for you. They don't take it out, right? Well, come to find out, Australia actually does that, and it's called the superannuation account. That's their retirement savings plan, and the government forces people to take 11% out of the salary every week, and it gets put into this retirement account that they cannot access without a ton of penalties, right? So that part of it, 3 months ago at least, I thought was a good idea. I'm not so sure now, because now I'm seeing the slippery slope where that could lead, right? So here's what they're doing: is not only are they forcing the Australians to set the money aside, but now they're highly taxing that account, and they're actually taxing the capital gains on that account. So they are taxing the potential money that people make, not the profit that people make. So let me give you an example. Okay. If you let's look at it from the perspective of a stock, of if you own a stock in the stock market. Okay. Now, obviously what's happening is this is retirement accounts, and they can be invested in stocks, that can be invested in mutual funds, that can be invested in all just across the board. They can be invested in the housing, they can be invested in capital venture, all sorts of different things, right? But let's just take the stock for example. If in December you buy a stock, one share of one stock for $10, and it skyrockets and goes to $20, 30% of that, let's say you owe a 30% tax on that capital gain, right? But you hold on to the stock, and in January, it drops back down to $10. You still owe $3.
Yep.
Tax, whether you sold the stock and made the money or not. Mm-hmm. That's insane. This is crazy.
It is crazy.
It's not insane. That is real. People.
It blows my mind that people even consider this as an option.
Yeah. And this is what they're trying to do. Okay. I'm gonna let y'all comment, and then I'm gonna continue my rant.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to say I see Australia, this is a canary in the coal mine. This is exactly what it is, because I interviewed Kay Rubacek, And she said that companies love, she's a filmmaker and she's from Australia, and she's had several generations of her family escape communism. So she's been in jail in China. She's been, I mean, just an incredible woman. But she said Australia is a testing ground for corporations because, and I looked into this a little more, it's isolated, it's westernized, it's a small representative market. They react fast to things that happen. So that's why companies love to test things there. And so it's a stable regulatory environment. It's got good economic environment as well. And so they do test launches like Google, Facebook, McDonald's. Everybody does tests there. But you know what that also means? Global elites test authoritarian policies there as well. And so that's what would happen during COVID. That's what's happening with digital surveillance and digital ID tests, censorship, media control, firearms. They don't have they gave up their firearms. Like they don't have weapons there. So it's a test bed for these kinds of policies. So have that frame here. Companies love to do it, and so do the communist globalist elites. And so that's my take here, is that it's kind of like, oh, let's do this and see what happens, see how people react. And then we'll know how we can adjust it next time when we do it somewhere else. Or maybe we can hide it a little better next time. So that's my take on this. I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah, was it Australia who's also now thinking about banning the machete too because firearms wasn't working? Like it's
the UK definitely has banned certain things like ninja swords specifically, which I think is hilarious. I wouldn't be surprised if Australia was following suit.
I think I saw that recently. I don't know if it was Australia or not, but the concept remains that like banning things doesn't really work. People find ways around it, and that applies to this too with the taxes because, and I'm sure you're going to get into this, Troy, so I hope I don't stomp on your feet too much, but this is just going to cause wealthy people to leave. That's all. They're just going to find other ways around it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is just, working a little bit with government and seeing how decisions are made and how it's kind of like a here and now type thing, or appease one group of people and not consider medium-term, short-term, and long-term effects of things and what other problems are going to be created with it. Like this also kind of just seems like maybe it's just sloppy work. People are so clueless. They don't know they don't understand. If you tax an unrealized gain, like we can even talk about whether they should even tax realized gains. That's where the discussion should be. But they want to tax unrealized gains. It's just unrealistic policy that could never be implemented. And so, or if it is implemented, it has devastating things. It's just like Doug even mentioned.
The crazy thing about this one though is that in Australia, it's not even that wealthy. Like, I mean, obviously, if you have over $3 million worth of value in your assets, then you're doing pretty well. Like you're not poor, clearly, but they're even considering dropping it down to 2 million from what I read, because they're not sure that the 3 million will work. And if you think about that for a minute, that's not that far away. Like that's not that difficult to get to that point
That's a great point, Doug, and it's actually worse than that, but continue.
Yeah. Well, so the thing that I saw was that it was actually going to affect farmlands a lot of agriculture. There's going to be a lot of, and because they make a lot of money, but if it's, if they're just attacking unrealized gains, it's not like those farmers are pocketing all of that cash. It's going right back into their business. And this is going to drive farming out too. Like that's just one example of how this could affect the entire country and turn it into a dystopia. That's like the end goal of this, in my opinion. I know that sounds dramatic, but
no, you're good. A couple quick points on this before you continue, Troy. For technical reasons, I had to look it up because the cap is 3 million Australian dollars. And of course, the technical term in Australia, that's called dollary dues. That's the Australian dollar in Australia is dollary dues. So 3 million dollary dues is actually only worth 2 million US dollary dues. So just so everybody knows that already.
Wait.
All right.
No,
Are
I'm
you
joking.
being
They don't call it
sarcastic right
dollary.
now, or is that really what
No,
they
don't call it dollary dues.
Oh my God. We're all sitting here like just swallowing that whole.
Let me know, anyone from Australia, let me know what you call your Australian dollars.
It's Australian dollar. That's what it's called.
Yeah,
I think
Australian dollar.
It's
called the Australian dollar.
So 3 million Australian dollars is only 2 million US dollars. So it's already that lower threshold. But the other thing that's important to note was the article I read about it. There was economists that were already saying part of the problem is, initially we'd be like, well, this only affects people with a lot of money. It's like, well, no, this is a retirement account. It's a forced retirement account. And to retire, you want your money to grow to at least $1 million or a couple $1 million. And so what they were worried about is, of course, that as inflation continues, And this law that they enacted, and this isn't just something they're trying to enact, like this is going into effect next month, or this, I think it's next month this is going to effect. So this is going to be enacted next month. And part of the problem is they haven't indexed it for inflation. So right now it's a $3 million cap in this, but it's what they're saying is essentially today's 22-year-olds in Australia with an earning average, just like normal average wages, who are forced to put in money into this retirement account. By the time that they retire, they will be at that $3 million threshold and they will be taxed. And I also saw that, like you said, Troy, it was a 15%. There was already a 15% tax, but this is an additional 15% tax. But it's the additional tax that is on the unrealized gains, from what I could tell. Like the initial 15, I don't know how the initial 15 was already taxed, but the extra tax is specifically on the unrealized gains. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's a good point.
So like if you look at the value of the Australian dollar, so if you trade currencies, you look at the fundamentals of what's happening with that nation, like the trade, the debt, all that kind of thing. And then you also look at the sentiment. Is the market risk on or risk off right now? And Australia, if you want to trade the Australian dollar, you look at things like commodities, natural gas, coal, oil, and gold, but you also look at their number one trading partner. It's very closely tied to the economy of their number one trading partner. Does anybody have a guess for who their number one trading partner is?
Probably, I would either China or the United States.
It rhymes with China. Yes. And so
there's a country that rhymes with China? What the heck?
It rhymes with China. So
West China. Taiwan. Are we talking about West Taiwan?
So I'm just saying,
Let's stop rhyming with China.
I don't. So that's something. I mean, think about this. We see these kind of ridiculous policies, and also we see that the Australian dollar, or the, what do you call it, the Aussie Wazzy, or whatever
Dollaroo.
Dollaroo. Okay.
It's named after
way
the
off track
national
here.
instrument, the didgeridoo.
That's
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry, but okay. My point is, look what's happening in China's economy. Then you can also see what's going to be happening with the Australian dollar. So it's closely tied there. That's
we should have had a didgeridoo sound to play during this episode every time somebody said something inappropriate.
Our friend
thank you,
Roy makes a good point. I like this. It's called foreign investments in tax shelter countries such as the Bahamas.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a good point.
Well, that's exactly what's going to happen. And this is the crazy thing. So I would like to think, I would like to think, for one thing, and I'm trying really hard to do that. I'd also like to thank my friend, not my real friend, but my friend online, because I read one post from him, Sean Ring from the Root Awakening, for really inspiring this level of freak out mode right now in me. With an interesting post he wrote all about what's happening in Australia. So y'all have already covered some of the negatives. So I want to list out some of the negatives, and then I'm going to list out the positives. Okay. Here's one of the things that, not this article, but this other one actually mentioned. In quote, it says, there are concerns that the policy could redirect investment away from venture capital and other long-term illiquid assets. You think?
Right.
I'm
reading that and going, there are concerns.
I mean,
no, that's exactly what
people brought it up.
This is great news, though. I mean, all these investment firms are going to save time. You don't have to do analysis anymore. You just throw darts at a board and see, and that's it. I mean, you save all that time. Look at that.
Oh, 100%. Doug mentioned, where are the quote unquote wealthy going to go? Well, they're going to leave, or they're going to somehow figure out a way around to get their money out of Australia. And
they're wealthy enough, they can afford to do that.
This has to be the design.
We're not talking about, here's the other point that Reese made. We're not just talking about the wealthy here. We're talking about ordinary, average Australians, because the number of people that this is going to affect by the end of this generation is 1.8 million Australians. 1.8 million easily. That's like conservative estimate. Because of what Reese said, the fact that this is money that, I mean, we would be doing the same thing here in the States if we actually all were disciplined and started saving for retirement at an early age, at 22 or whatever. Well,
I haven't done that.
But by the time that they get there, the money's not going to be worth what it's worth now. Right. And that's not, just because you have 2 million in retirement when you're 75 does not mean you're rich.
Which is what happens when you have the government forcing you to do something.
It means you can afford to pay your medical bills and you're going to retire comfortably, but that does not mean that you're wealthy. And a lot of the people that have arrived at a $2 million or $3 million retirement amount they have not done it. They have not gotten wealthy, in the sense of like, well, that means they built a business or they have all these other assets or something like that. No, they are ordinary working people who have slowly gained, saved their money and gained money over time. Here's another thing. Here's another problem with it. It's very hard to accurately pinpoint asset values in some cases. So if this expands at all, it's going to be a regulatory nightmare. And it already is going to be. I mean, think about this, for instance. What if I buy a old Ford pickup truck to drive around, right? And I spend $10K on it right now in the used car market here in the States. And then turns out next year, a movie comes out and the new Transformers movie and the main character's driving that truck. Now everybody wants it. And this old used truck turns into a classic all of a sudden. Everybody wants to get this, and now it goes up to $20,000 in value. Guess what? I have to pay taxes on a used vehicle I paid for in cash last year.
Right. Which actually, that's a great example because that's what I'm like. I love the old, the classic like 1980s Suburbans, and I used to have one a few years ago and it was an awesome truck and I bought it for like $2,000 or something like that. And that exact truck right now, for some strange reason, is worth like $8-9 grand. Like, that's crazy to me. And like not spruced up, nothing. It's just the same vehicle. Cause I've been looking again, like, oh, I'd love to get one of those. And I'm like, never mind.
Right. We might talk about this later, but one thing we haven't talked about as well, like you said, Troy, the valuation deal is really, really difficult. I'm sure we'll talk about how they floated this idea in the United States maybe later in this episode. But the valuation thing is obviously really difficult because if it's in the stock market, then you can see, oh, it goes up, it goes down. If it's anything else, then it's like, well, my company grew this year. It's like, okay, well, how much money did you make or how much value did your company grow? We're going to tax you on that. When it's just like, yeah, like you said, it's a regulatory nightmare. Now we have to hire a bunch of people to constantly value everything, every asset that you own and try to figure out a way to tax the unrealized value. But the other problem, besides, of course, the fact that it's unrealized, so it's unfair to be like, hey, you owe us money because you made money. Be like, I didn't actually make any money. Now I have to sell a different asset for this tax. That, well, I'm sure we'll get into this more.
And then you'll get taxed on that.
How far this could like collapse the economy, essentially, I don't know if Australia doing this will completely collapse their economy, but it's a step in that direction to be like, once you start taxing unrealized gains, well, you made money this year, but it's like, but I don't have any cash lying around. So what do I do to pay this tax on my unrealized gains? Like I have to sell off my assets somewhere. I have to sell my stock. I have to sell my business. I have to
either have to sell the asset that made the unrealized gains and have to stop making money, or you find something else to sell. Exactly.
Right, exactly. That's the problem. But the other thing besides that is also what feels like it's incredibly horrendously unfair is just take stocks, for example. If your stocks go up, so from $50 to $100 in 1 year, well, I owe taxes on that $50 gain. Well, next year, my stocks go back down to 50 because stocks go up and down.
Well, think about what that means is people are going to start selling it beforehand, and then it's going to start collapsing the stock market.
Exactly. Well, what I'm saying is, unrealized gain. So if it goes up to 100, I owe taxes on the $50 that it went up. Well, say the end of next year, it goes back down to $50. My asset went back down. Does the government give me that money back?
Do I get the money back? No.
Do I get the money back? My asset isn't worth $100 anymore.
That's
the government doesn't give you your money back. Well, say the following year, say it goes back up to 100. Then the government comes around and says, hey, you just earned $50 again. It's like, no, I didn't earn any money. It went up, it went down, it went back up. And now I have to pay you twice on the going back every time it goes up.
That is
I have to pay you more money. So it's just, it makes to the point where you're like, why would anybody invest in something that like the stock market? Why would they invest in something that goes up and down if they have to pay the government money every time that it starts to go back up? Because it's going to go down and go back up again. So anyways, I'm sure we'll get into that more later.
So we're thinking about this from a rational standpoint. And I want to propose, we're discussing this based on the merits of what we see is going to happen in the market. And we're evaluating it as good or bad from that standpoint. But I want to propose that we need to take a different lens to look through this. We need to be asking a different question and saying, what is this a solution to? What makes this a good decision? What makes this a good decision? Well, let's see. Over 100 years ago, North Korea was thriving. They were doing well. And the government said, give us your land and we'll give you food. They had some issues and people did that. And then they ended up having mass starvation. But you know what? Now you have North Korea. Everybody knows what North Korea is. So what makes this make sense is if you want to destroy property rights and you want to actually have more state control, because that's exactly what this leads to, is it's destroying property rights. It's a money grab, property rights grab. It
Yep.
starts with the rich. It goes down. It's leading the way for more asset seizures. It's changing the behaviors. I mean, this is a designed step. And so that's the whole point. And digital tools like central bank digital currencies makes this even easier. You have forced equity, all these kinds of things. The whole point is more state control. And that's what this is doing. It's just destroying individual rights. That's what they did in North Korea. That's what they've done in China. That's exactly where this is going. So we have to answer the question, what makes this make sense? Now, it doesn't make sense to you and me in our integrity-bound brains and consciences, but for a state actor that wants to have more control, this makes complete sense. And so that's exactly where this is going. That's the whole point of this.
And we just talked about what DeSantis is doing. Governor DeSantis, Ron DeSantis in Florida. I'm going to say his name one more time for those that didn't get it. He's trying to eliminate property taxes. We're in the states. There are places in the states that are trying to move the opposite direction and trying to give people more control over their property, over what they own, over their home. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take away people's ability to own things, essentially, in the long run. And this is David Lesperance. He's a managing partner at a firm that specializes in tax advice, and I believe he's in Australia. He said, wealth taxes, like income taxes, are always introduced only against the wealthy. But he said, but an honest review of the history of tax policy shows that this inevitably is expanded to include an ever-expanding definition of wealth. So he's saying it's not going to stop here. And he's saying history shows that it doesn't stop here. He's saying this is a downward spiral. It's a terrible idea. And it's going to eventually affect a lot more people and a lot more types of assets. So we touched on most of the negatives. I want to hit a couple more that we didn't touch on. We hit.
Can I point out something real quick, Troy?
Yes.
Our guy on the back end said we need to clarify that the truck example was just an example of what it could potentially do. Is not actually.
It was an example of if this expanded to other forms of assets.
Yeah.
That was my example, was a real world example trying to put that into this. Yeah.
I wanted to clarify that it was just
that example is not too far off because that was floated in the United States. So the one that they're implementing in Australia next year is specifically on the
retirement account.
The retirement account that they're forced to have, kind of like Social Security that we have here. They're forced retirement account. But that vehicle example, that was part of what Kamala Harris wanted to do. She wanted to float a unrealized gains tax. And originally I thought that was just unrealized gains in the stock market. But I just looked into it right before this, and it was not. It was actually for all of your unrealized gains of all of your assets that you own, for any household that was worth $100 million or more. Right. So anybody worth, and again, that's a high cap. But we could get into the whole, that's not just going to affect the 100 million people, though, because if they end up having to pull their money out of the stock market, and most Americans have their money in the stock market crashes, or if they have to sell off their business or sell off their whatever. Now people are unemployed, there's all these other issues.
Well, it's not just
the issue, though, is that it would also include crazy stuff. Like people would have to value hey, how many assets do you have? It's like, well, my vehicle went up in value this year. And the tax man says, well, that is part of this tax. So that is not happening right now, but it was floated last year by Kamala Harris and it would go even down to your individual assets. If you were worth more than 100 million, it would go down to your individual assets, everything that you own. And if anything goes up in value, you would have to pay, I think it was 30% tax or 25% tax.
Yeah, these are not new ideas. This is all communist, Marxist. I mean, these are nothing new here. And remember what I said at the beginning. This is a testing ground. And it's moving westward. And what the left does, or the elites, what they do is they throw something out there, kind of let the frenzy happen, maybe pull it back, and then a year or 2 years, few years later, reintroduce something, or some crisis happens where then they say this is the only option for us to do this. Well, we gotta fund this, so now let's tax this just this one time. And it's too late. And that's the problem, is on the conservative side, we don't play offense. We're just kind of saying, no. And then we sit there, but we take a step back and we say, no. Next time you take another step back. And it's slowly giving up ground rather than playing offense and taking territory and actually going. And that's starting to change, thankfully, in the West by God's grace. But who knows how long that's going to last. But I mean, so that's something we need to keep in mind. Like, this is a design process. What's the outcome it wants to get? And it's going to be coming westward. And so that, the good news is that this has revealed something for us. Now we can see the truth behind this and what's going to be happening and what's going to be coming, and we can better prepare for it and hopefully push it off longer.
Finish your negatives, Troy. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I think we've gone over most of them. The one that I wanted to mention that we didn't hit on was we did talk about the stock market crashing potentially because the most wealthy people are going to take their money out. They're going to hide their money. They're going to bury it in a hole in the ground or leave the country, whichever one. And yet at the same time, a lot of the wealthy fund the venture capital investments. So think about Shark Tank, for example. People are like, hey, I got this small business. I need more equity. I need more capital to push it to the next level. And they're like, I'm going to show up and try to get Mark Cuban or one of these crazy people to invest. That whole part of the economy is going to go away because what this kind of tax does is it reduces people's willingness to take a risk on things like that. And so it's not just, oh, we're going to crash the stock market over here. It's like we are also going to crash people's hopes and dreams across the entire nation. Oh, you need a loan, or you need an investor so you can start this cool business idea you had. That doesn't exist anymore in this nation. You can't find it. And if the bank's not going to give you a loan, nobody's going to give you a loan. That's the problem with this, is that it destroys innovative businesses. It destroys people's willingness to invest. Yeah. It's too risky. Mm-hmm. And because here's the problem, you're not just risking losing money, you're risking losing money when you make money. It's just it's so
before you make money. And that's my point, is that's the design of
that creates a disparity, and it's very intentional because it makes the rich richer and the poor poorer, because you're eliminating the middle ground there, because normal people don't want to make a certain amount, but if you're rich enough, you can afford to get around that. Right. Find the loopholes and keep making more money, and then it's just this expansion the opposite way. Potentially,
I would guess that they're gonna have a hard time getting around this one. But in Australia,
well, anyways, it would. My thought on it is it would still limit the amount of people who could do that. You would have a very, very few who could do that, and then the majority would be in the held down category where they can't break past this barrier. But so it would still eliminate some in that higher level, but not all. There would still be some people left who could just keep going and not worry about it because they know loopholes.
Let me share the positive real fast that I've got, and then I want to address what you just said, Doug, because I think that's important. But I'll turn it over to you, Ryan, too. Here's the positive. I just want to get through my list of negatives and positives because it's taking me a while. Oh, here's the positive. Okay, this is Sean Ring. This is a quote from him in this article from the Rude Awakening. Here, and I'm just going to read what he says. In a way, we must be thankful. This plan is so stupid and destructive, it'll kill Australia's economy for all the world to see. And then even the most leftist governments won't dare replicate it anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. The positive is we're gonna learn a lesson the hard way from Australia's mistake. That's it. That's the only positive I could come up with.
Man,
that's exactly what I said. That's the positive I had, which is we can see what the effects is going to be. But my point is, I don't think they're going to go through with it. I think it's just kind of like a test in the waters, and then something's going to happen, and then they'll go through with another version of it, and it'll sneak in and this and that. But that's again, remember, Australia, testing grounds. That's what they do. They see how people react. They see what they respond to, and then what do? They make an adjustment, and they're ready for next time. So when you guys want
y'all, oh sorry.
I just want to give a history lesson on destruction of the middle class, but go ahead and do what you were going to say, and then we'll go back to that.
No, do it because this is going to take a while. I want to show y'all a very funny example of how insane this idea is. This is like kind of breaking the mold again, but it's another example, and it's a little funny. So,
well, okay. So I just want to say this idea of destroying the middle class also is nothing new. You can go back to ancient Rome. That's what they did there. That was the fall of the Republic in the 2nd century BC. And so as land became more concentrated, it came into the hands of the elites. So confiscating that, you have ancient Europe and Pharaoh's control over land and labor. You have that as well. You have medieval examples in Europe, suppression of I don't know how to pronounce some of this stuff, but you have merchants and skilled workers and feudal lords and monarchs and all that. So that's happening. Then you have the Byzantine Empire. You have the French Revolution. You have the Soviet Union under Lenin and Stalin. You have the China Cultural Revolution. So these are patterns throughout history where you have taxation, regulation, you have labeling others as enemies, you have property seizure, you have merging of the state and the elite. That's the thing, is what we're seeing today is you have the elite and the state being merged. Even in the West, you see big pharma, you see big food, you see all these things happening of the emerging of the state and the elite. And so you have also targeted violence and different purges and things. So all of these things, imposing wealth tax, centralizing economic controls, all these powers, destroying the independent people and the middle class. This is the design. This is a pattern. This is nothing new. So I think that, even like I said, back to ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, and all that. And so there's, I was gonna say there's a good way that this can be done, but I don't think there is a good way this can be done. You need a thriving middle class.
Isn't the middle class concept a relatively new one in the whole grand scheme of world history? Like it's not something that has been perpetual throughout history.
Well,
right?
I mean, if a man can feed his family by his own land that he has and he farms it himself, and he has enough food to feed his family, and he can have the mule he needs or the donkey he needs. I mean, for me, that's middle class. He's not starving. He's not, that's like
a different way to define it because of the era that it's in. That makes sense.
Middle class to me would be, hey, they're doing well. They're taking care of their family, and they can put food on the table. They have a shelter, that sort of thing. That's kind of how I would define that. But so that idea is
lower middle class.
Lower middle class, sure. But I mean, maybe he has 3 mules and he's actually making enough so that he's selling food to his neighbor, and then his neighbor lets him borrow his donkey to do that. That's a middle class, and then everybody's doing well because he's giving him food because he can borrow his donkey, and he's can buy another donkey. Like that's a good middle class.
So it's a mule kind of Uber situation.
Part of what you're talking about there, Ryan, makes me think of this might be like a tiny bit abstract, but I think it's extremely relevant for the way that when you say, like, we look at the unrealized gains tax and we're like, this is the worst idea anybody could ever think of. Why would somebody do this? But I think part of it is the abstract ideas that we have about the economy, and those people that on the left have versus people on the right have, because on the right, typically people see the creation of wealth and value as a good thing, because when people are creating value and creating wealth, then it's like, okay, well, we have more wealth and more value and more opportunities to go around. But on the left, it's usually people have, especially the Marxist communist mindset of the economy, they have the fixed pie economy. So they have the economy and the wealth is only this big. And so if a rich person has $10 million, then they took some of the pie and there's less pie to go around for everybody else. And that's how people on the left think. And that's why usually when they have wealth, they never talk positively about wealthy people. They never they talk about how many jobs they've created, how many businesses they've created, how much value they've added to the nation or to the economy, how many opportunities they've created by investing and doing this and doing that. They don't talk about those things. Instead, they say, oh, this person is, they're a criminal. They're made off with $100 million. They stole that from the taxpayers and from the people around them or whatever. Like they talk about it in a very negative way, that they somehow are hurting people by having the fact that they have money, that they have a lot of money. But it comes from that fixed pie mentality. It comes from the economy doesn't grow, value doesn't grow. It's just this one little pie. And if you have this big slice, then there's less to go around for everybody else. And so and you can see that in the capital gains tax, because they're like, well, we're going to tax the creation of value. I was like, well, what do you want to do when you want people to do less of something? If you want people to smoke less, you tax cigarettes. If you want people to drink less, you tax alcohol. That's what governments do. Well, if you want people to create less value, then you tax the value. You don't tax and especially the unrealized gain, because that's taxing the value before the person even has a chance to get cash out from the value, right? And so it's just a complete, 180 to, I would say, the more realistic way of viewing wealth, which is if everybody has wealth, then we can grow more wealth and everyone gets wealthier, as opposed to, no, it's just a fixed pie. And so if you have, $10 million, then there's less money to go around for everybody else. And that's not how it works. So it's completely flawed economic thinking, which is what Marxism is based in. So unfortunately it is. It's like, well, it's just like taxing cigarettes. You're going to tax unrealized gains, then there's going to be less people trying to make value in your country. And the rich Australians are going to leave and go somewhere else where they can create value and not get taxed for it. So
I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. I think that your concept is accurate, but the example is not terribly accurate, because in my experience, from what I've seen from people, is when there's an addiction involved, it doesn't matter. They'll figure out a way to pay it regardless, like with tobacco or alcohol or whatever.
Or an underground market.
I don't think that has helped a whole lot, but I'm not sure. I don't have the stats on it. But from what I see, I still see people buying cigarettes. They're more expensive. Like coming from California, where it really got crazy, people still bought cigarettes, or they just found ways around it. Basically,
What I mean is why does the government say that they're taxing cigarettes though?
Right. I think
I don't know whether it's effective or not, but I'm saying
whether it's the real motive or not is a
taxes
different
on things
question.
that you want people to do.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I get that.
That's what I was
saying. That's the intention.
That's the
Gotcha.
intention. I say
Or
there's
at
a
least
similar intention
the
here. They're
professing
putting
intention.
taxes on creating value because I guess they don't like people who create value. That's my thought. But
yeah, so we've talked about this, how this was actually something that was proposed under Biden, and then Harris just attacked her name aboard and said, yes, I'm going to do this if I get elected. So she wanted to do this here in the States. That's how it.
Wait, Harris
applied.
took someone else's idea?
Everybody else's idea. Okay, and then this was Trump's direct response. I'm going to give this, and then I'm going to move on to that fun example I had. But this is Trump's response. He said, if that's going to happen, go out and open an appraisal company because you're going to make a fortune. He said, that's about the only group that's going to make it. And accountants.
Mm-hmm.
He said, it is the craziest idea. And then about investors and entrepreneurs, this is what he said. He said, they will be forced to leave for other countries. So Trump had I believe, the appropriate response. But there's somebody else that I think has another appropriate response that may even be more relevant than Donald Trump's response. And somebody's going to laugh at I don't even have the I don't have the article open, but I'm going to just say it. Dave Ramsey. Okay.
Oh no.
So, Dave Ramsey. Some people listening are going to like freak out because you don't like him. Other people that like him, whatever. It doesn't matter.
People that
I'm
don't
just
like
taking
him
the
probably.
stats that he did. Okay. This is the study they did. They studied 10 million millionaires. Sorry, 10,000. That's a big difference. 10,000 millionaires here in the States. This is what they found. The top 5 careers for millionaires out of these 10,000 here in the States that they studied include, guess what? Not business owners, not people that were wealthy from their birth, not their elite rich. They were engineers, accountants, teachers, management, and attorneys.
Dang.
Teachers hit the top 5 for out of these 10,000 millionaires. So we are not talking about, so think about the people that a tax like this would affect. And these are people that have most of their wealth in their retirement account and probably in their house equity, right?
Right.
So this is something they're going to live off of once they retire. 79% of these millionaires, of these 10,000 that they studied, did not receive any inheritance at all from their parents or other family members. 79%. So their wealth did not come from somebody else. I was born into a rich family. Their wealth came from hours and hours and weeks and months and years of working hard and saving their money. These aren't rich families. They're people that invested their hard-earned money over time, and they just saw it grow in their retirement account. So are you going to ask a teacher to pay the unrealized gain taxes from their retirement account because they made wise financial decisions? That's my question. Like, think about it. It's like, hey, teacher, you make $40,000 a year. Now you need to pay the tax on this. It's like, hey, what do you want me to do? Cash out my, in Australia, my forced retirement account that you forced me to have, and pay the penalties for trying to cash that out just so I can pay the taxes on it? Insanity.
Control.
So, let me give you all a funny example. Now that I've gotten all the freak out and I've gone on my rant, let me give you all a funny example. This is my friend Max Foch. He's not my real friend, but everybody that I watch online is my friend. This is Max Foch, and he came out with this video a couple of years ago. I became the world's richest man for 7 minutes. I wanted to watch this video. I've seen it online. I wanted to watch it. I've never taken the time, but I was like, I'm gonna go watch this video now and see what he has to say. Okay.
Are you meaning to share it, Troy, on the screen?
Yes. Sorry. I mean to show it on the screen. There we go. All right. This is Max Foch. He became the world's richest man for 7 minutes. And his comment is, come at me, Elon. So all he wanted to do was be richer than Elon Musk for a small period of time. And he successfully did that, maybe. And this example kind of plays on the whole idea of like the whole crypto spike, where you open up your app and you're like, oh, wow, I'm a millionaire. I'm like, oh, wait, never mind. It's not worth anything anymore. I didn't get a chance to hit sell in time. And so it's like that spike, but you would still be paying unrealized capital gains off of that. That's the crazy thing. So here's what he does in this video. Okay. He tries to make a company and he literally signs up through he's in the UK, signs up through the government app or website or whatever. And he registers for this company. And they ask him, what does this company do? And he says, well, it makes money. And that's not one of the options. So he has to choose something else. He eventually lands on it manufactures noodles. He's like, I can't think of anything else, right? And he calls this company officially Unlimited Money Limited. So that's the name of this company. It's a real company that he created. Okay.
That's awesome.
He tries issuing 1 trillion shares of stock. When he signs, you got to decide how much stock are you going to issue.
What?
That was not allowed. And he brings it down. He finally brings it down to 10 billion. So that was like the cap.
10 billion.
So he issues 10 billion shares of stock in this real company that he creates. And then he goes out on the street and he tries to sell 1 share of the stock for 50 pounds. And eventually, after talking to dozens of people, he finds this nice lady named Hope. And she's like, okay, I'll do it. And she goes down to the ATM. She gets 50 pounds of cash. She comes back. She signs the papers and she buys 1 share of stock in his company for 50 pounds. So as he's asking her why she wants to invest in the company while she's signing the papers, he is laughing. Like that's how it's kind of a joke, right?
Right.
But he sends the papers off and to whatever officials praise company values or whatever. And he gets the company officially assessed the value. And they say, your company is worth, as far as we can tell, based on all this information, 500 billion pounds. Because there's 10 billion stocks, and somebody else was willing to pay. You own all the stocks except for this one person, and they were willing to pay 50 pounds for 1 stock.
Wow.
Right? And so
That's awesome.
then he keeps reading at the very end of this assessment. They say, but as a technicality, we need to inform you, you're probably going to get accused of fraud very quickly, and you probably should dissolve this company right now. And so he gets online and dissolves the company through the same website, but he's able to claim that he was the richest man on earth for 7 minutes.
That's
It took 7 minutes.
That's pretty
opening
awesome.
that paper and then dissolving his company. But here's the truth of the matter: is he didn't actually have the money,
Right.
right? But the Australian government, in the bounds of this fictitious example, would come along behind him and say, now you owe us $20 billion in tax this
They'd be
year.
coming to get their pound of flesh for sure. Like
That's amazing.
And it's like,
Well done.
This is an extreme, ridiculous example, but I
Right.
believe it shows the ridiculousness of this idea in general. It's the most insane thing that anyone's ever done. So I'm going to leave it at that. If y'all have anything else you want to add to it, but that's my rant for today.
I was captivated by your story. I did have a thought, but I don't remember what it was because that was very entertaining.
I'm sure I'll get the juices flowing here again, but going outside of just the unrealized gains tax, it does make me think a lot about, and again, I'm getting a little bit into the abstract, but I think a lot of why I consider myself to be, although I don't love labels and I'm not right wing all the way that describes everything about what I think, but I do find myself to be more on the right and on almost everything than the left, especially even when it comes to economic stuff. Is part of the reason is because we talked about this earlier, is the rewarding of good behavior versus the rewarding of bad behavior. And you mentioned, I say you talked about this, you highlighted it when you referred to the fact that, most millionaires, at least in the United States, did not inherit their money. They don't own businesses. They're not money gurus. They're literally just normal people who have worked their entire life and invested their money their entire life. And when they get to retirement, they have $1 million or $10 million and on modest means, and they never own a fancy car, and they didn't spend their money when they were young on stupid stuff. They lived modest lives, and now they have money when they're retired, right? And so they don't have to work, and they can pass money down to their grandchildren on all these things, right? And so that is actual good behavior that you would probably want to incentivize to go to incentives. You want to incentivize that sort of thing because that's how you have a stable economy. That's how you have stable society. That's how you have stable families and communities and all these sorts of things. That's just really good behavior. What's crazy about so much of the left's economic policies is it actually takes away the incentives for good behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So just one example is trying to pay off people's student loans. And now I don't like the fact that college is extremely expensive, but that's also actually a government problem, not to get sidetracked. The reason college is so immensely expensive is because the government makes it so easy to get loans to go to college that colleges have no incentives to bring down their prices because they know they can charge as much as they want and they can keep increasing their tuition every single year. And everybody's got to go to college, and the government's going to give out loans for it, even for people that can't necessarily repay those loans. And so that's actually a government issue as well. But that one little piece is we have so many people that are like, let's forgive student loan debt. And it's like, well, you are incentivizing bad behavior. You want people,
Right.
obviously, if I was in a situation where I felt like if I take out a loan, whether it's for a business or for going to college, and I think the government's going to pay it back, then I'm not incentivized at all to do the right thing. I'm actually incentivized to go do things that I cannot pay back, knowing that the government's just going to pay it off for me. Like, of course, I'll go get my PhD and basket weaving and rack up $1 million in debt, and then I won't be able to pay it back because I can't get like a high paying job. It's fine. The government will just pay it off for me. It's like, well, that's a bad incentive. But it also, if you take away the incentives of people having lots of money when they retire because they worked really hard, then it's like, okay, well, I can either spend my whole life living modestly and then have a big nest egg, and then the government tax 30% of unrealized gains for the rest of the time. And then when I die, they're going to tax my they have inheritance tax, and they're going to take away the money I want to give to my kids. I could do that. Or I could just like buy a sports car when I'm young and, and then go to college and not be able to pay back the college, and the government's going to, it's just that it's like the more left-wing economic policies, the more it takes away incentives for doing the right thing. And it's just like you have like a society of grifters that are just trying to get whatever they can from the government until the system collapses because you can't pay for it anymore.
And again, this is about control. I mean, if you think about like government coming in as the savior, it's like I've given this example before. Somebody starts a fire at a person's back door, and then they go on the front and they alert them, and they say, by the way, I've got this fire extinguisher. It's $1,000. Like, they're the savior. They're this is amazing. Thank you. What are the odds of that? But they started the fire. So the government incentivizes this situation where people get into this debt. It's like a debt trap that China does with all these other countries where they're investing. They incentivize this. This is just one example. They incentivize the situation. People take the bait, and then they come later and say, oh, well, we'll just absolve all of that. Just give us this and that. And it's the same thing. I mean, give up the rights, give up the property, and it just destroys the middle class. And like this is actually class warfare disguised as tax reform. Like that's what it's Marxism. Like Marx,
it's intentional.
It's intentional.
They're doing it on purpose.
Abolish. What are the Marxist tenets? I mean, they abolish private property. They say, it's class warfare. You punish capital. The state redefines what's valuable. And I mean, this is all it is. It's the Marxist playbook, and it's just put in new clothes and dressed up and done differently. That's exactly what it is. And in the U.S., I think you have people like Biden and these kinds of people that, whether they were educated in Marxism or not, they might just see, hey, they may think this is just a good way to get people to vote for him. And so they go ahead and do it. But someone gave them this idea. Like they didn't come up with this idea, or maybe they read it somewhere and maybe they secretly know this is Marxist takeover. But I don't think everybody involved in that knows that. I think a lot of people are just what they call useful idiots, and they just go along with it. And because they have some other benefit and they don't realize they're putting the whole thing together. It's like Swalwell, dating the Chinese spy, like I don't know. He just, whatever, just give her what she wants. And, like they just don't realize they're just a pawn in this big scheme. And
could you imagine too, if the government were to do something like this, and thinking about both Australia and America or anybody who wanted to implement something like this, what they would have to do then next is implement a strategy of how to value things. And if the government is in charge of that, if they're the ones sending out appraisers, do you know what the government does with valuation when they just do whatever they want? I worked for the DOD. There was packages of screws that were worth thousands of dollars. I'm thumbsing up myself.
That's a great point. I mean, and why don't we just digitize it, and then it'd be easier because we don't have enough resources to do all of this by hand, and then we'll have AI do it. Like we'll just have AI do it, and then we don't have to worry about any of this. You guys just sit back and go eat your Snickers bar or whatever you want. And
I think the worst aspect of that, I mean, what you're saying is, okay, we're gonna set the value potentially. We're gonna tax you on that value, but the worst aspect is this is an asset we're forcing you to have. So it's like we're forcing you to have this, then we're going to potentially value it because it's easier that way, and then we're going to tax you on that value. It's crazy. I'm gonna call for closing comments though, since we are hitting that 50-minute mark. And then I've got one more thing to share. I'm going to share this because I want to add a little bit of hope to this conversation. I know I've jumped off the deep end with my crazy rants and stuff. But at the end of the day, I have peace about the future, even the financial future, the economy, all that. And here's the reason why. It's Psalms 37:25. It says, I have been young and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken or his descendants begging for bread. So there's this idea that God holds everything in his hands. And when we walk in his ways, we can put our trust in him, not in the national economy, not in the world economy, not in what is happening in Australia, not in what's happening in the United States. Obviously, I'm praying for the best for Australians, and I love Australians and want their economy to be flourishing. I want people to be doing well there. But at the same time, my hope is not in the economy. It's in God who provides. So that would be my last closing statement.
Yeah, I think one thing, we kind of hinted at this, and I love that, and that's great. And I'll be praying for Australia as well. And they and hoping that their dollary dues don't all end up in the hands of the government. But one thing that we kind of hinted around was just the fact that, and you actually, your opening article had was like this idea of a mass exodus of the wealthy leaving Australia. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, as we talked about, this account that they're trying to tax is required by the government. You have to have your money into this account. And I think you said, Troy, it was like 11% of the money you make every year has to go into this account. And so that's where it's just like, as Doug mentioned, which again, I know that the wealthy are very good at, they have a lot of incentives to move their money around in ways that don't get taxed. And so a lot of times these sorts of taxes, they're able to, the people who have the most money are actually able to just completely skirt around it. By moving it overseas and stuff like that. But because they're required by the government to put the money into this account, it does make me wonder, like, if it's going to get to the point where they can't actually avoid the taxation from the government to the extent where they could just go, okay, it's just not worth living in Australia because they forced me to put my money in this account and then they tax it in this crazy unfair way. So I will just go to a country that doesn't have. And I wonder if they put this in, well, I say if, it's going into effect next month. So I wonder what the effect is going to be. And I wonder if you really are going to see not just an exodus of resources of people trying to get their money out of Australia so it doesn't get taxed, but actually be able to be, I can't do that because I'm forced to have this government account. So instead, I'm just going to leave Australia and, hello, United States, or hello, Philippines, or Singapore, or somewhere else where they can move to and jump off the Australia ship altogether. I just wonder if that is if they're going to start seeing that happening, and if the government is going to pivot and do something about it once it occurs. So,
yeah, I think that's why I'm such a big proponent of freedom, because what happens is when you're talking about the excuse me, the government forcing anybody to do anything, that's when you start getting problems. And I think people should have the freedom to make money or not. If people want to be poor, they should be, you know what I mean? Like, if they want to be rich, they should be allowed to do that. But the last thing we need is the government coming in and saying, hey, you have to do this, or there's going to be consequences to it. And so unfortunately, it seems like Australia doesn't have as much of that freedom, and I hope that we can maintain that over here and lead the way on that. But I do agree with you, Troy. At the end of the day, regardless of whether or not we have freedom, God is sovereign and he's in control, and he's really our ultimate source regardless. So if you don't have that, then you don't have much.
Well said. I think this shows what the purpose of government. I mean, government protects our rights. They don't give us rights. God gives us the rights. And so you said God is in control, and that is absolutely correct. We see his sovereignty all throughout history and throughout the Bible. It's all demonstrated there for us. But the thing is, even if it's going to be going downhill and all these things are coming no matter what, we still individually have assignments from God that we need to do while on this earth. And so we're fulfilling advancing his kingdom, representing his interests, whatever table we're sitting at. And so imagine someone on the Titanic, okay? There was a man that probably was on there, said he's going to try and individually witness to as many people and share the gospel on the Titanic as he can. And all of a sudden that ship starts sinking. Does he just say, well, I guess I'm not going to do my assignment anymore? No, he probably radically changes and starts shouting for everybody to give their life to Jesus because this ship is going down. And so we have to think, what does God have for us to do in this? We should have peace in all of this. And so that gets to my final point, which is that the root cause of this, at least in part, is an uninformed electorate and an unengaged electorate. you have in Australia. You saw that happen. People gave up their rights. They gave up their guns. They didn't know what really was going on. They didn't understand the implications of what they were doing. And we have that in the U.S. You have only 10% of voters that are highly informed and engaged and actually want to hold leaders accountable. Now, thankfully, that's changing. But my point is, it doesn't really matter where the big picture is going. We all have individual assignments, and we have no excuse to not be walking in peace and closeness with the Lord and intimacy with him every single day. And so that's my final rant for this episode.
That's really good. And I would like to add, Ryan is probably not talking about any of the Australians that are listening to this video, because you're probably very informed and you probably did not vote for those policies. But I think you're right. So anyways, that's a wrap. Thank y'all for joining us. Great conversation today. Great conversation happening in the chat that I've been watching as well. Yeah. So we will be returning tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. U.S. Central Time, for a daily news headlines live stream. See you later.